Let's get into it. All of you have really incredible backgrounds coming to this panel. I was so excited to meet all of you for this panel, and you all do work to overcome structural barriers and equity around generational wealth building, land use reform, environmental activism, dismantling the harms of systemic discrimination in all sorts of ways. So I'd love to start by having each of you tell us a little bit about why you do the work you do and really what brought you to this moment. And we can just start right next to me here.
Thank you, Shanti. First, I want to say thank you all for coming out on a rainy, cold day and spending it with us during your work day. I also want to highlight that this is International Women's History Month, and we have a panel of women doing this work. And the specific reason why I called that out is very personal for me. To answer the question, Shanti, I've been an advocate for this space since I was a little girl, but I didn't know what I was talking about. So a really quick personal anecdote, I thought I was gonna be a pediatrician. I went to the University of Florida and took my first weed out classes, they call them. It's like a big auditorium where they try to discourage people from going to pre-med, because everybody wants to be pre-med. And I had no clue what was next. My entire life up to that point was tracking me to be a pediatrician. But I took a random humanities class, Cities of the World, and so many things for me clicked. As I said at the beginning, I was a little girl. I used to draw maps. I have a really huge family and about 100 cousins. And we used to sit down and we used to like blue sky what our family compound would look like. I really wish I could find these maps. They were very rude and rudimentary, but that was like my first taste of it. And I used to ask questions about my community. My hometown is very rich in amenities, but very lacking in equity and those resources flowing to the community members who look like me, which is 85% African American. And I used to ask my mother at 10, Ma, why is our community poor? And she was like, girl, go eat, leave me alone. But then going back to University of Florida, I took that class and everything clicked. And that led me to get an urban and regional planning degree with a focus on affordable housing and a minor in historic preservation. And then that led me on my career. And the backbone of all of that, I've always been very hard-headed and strong-willed. And throughout my entire career, up until coming to Smart Growth America, I've always been the only in the room. And so I've always been the only fighting for those who were not in the room. So those who were harmed by re-screw, I'm gonna use that word now, all the time, every chance I get, and urban renewal. But I didn't know that was the reasons. Even getting an urban and regional planning degree and being a policy nerd and a history nerd and reading so much about my chosen profession, I didn't know about Robert Moses and his intentional racist land use policies until maybe 5 years after I graduated from my graduate school. But I've always been that person standing up for those who were harmed by these practices when other people were like, I'm just doing my job. So I'll pause there so I can give the rest of my panelists a chance to shine as well.
Great. I'm Kathy Flanagan-Payton. I'm the CEO of Fifth Ward Community Redevelopment Corporation. I have the privilege and the honor of serving in the neighborhood where I grew up. Never growing up in lack, I will say that, because I've never had a night on the streets. I've never went to bed hungry, and I've never experienced those things. But in the same vein, I experienced all the inequities that we're talking about today. So my family, for example, was displaced out of Fifth Ward because Interstate 10 that runs through the city of Houston and Highway 59 took our community and divided up into four different communities and sectors. And as a young girl, when we would come back into the neighborhood, I told my mom that the birds have to be eating the people. Because every time we came back into the community, there were fewer and fewer people. The businesses were being closed. The cars were not on the street. And our community really was dying on the vine. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the University of Texas at Austin, where I finally recognized and realized that, one, I was a poor black girl, because again, I never knew that. And every day I was at the University of Texas at Austin, I was told that my mom and my dad's money wasn't enough to buy me an education. That became my determination. That was my perseverance to fight. And after I came back home to Houston, the only place that I felt like I could be of value was bringing and being an opportunity for the young black women and men in my community, because I represented an example. When I came back from UT Austin and began to continue to fellowship in that community and being a part of the church, there were more people going into the crack houses than there were going into the churches. And so we had to do something about that to make sure that we were a positive influence and represented an example for the people there. And today, as Houston's first baby of 1963, the first for my parents, the first for my paternal grandparents, and the first baby born in St. Elizabeth Hospital, I can sit here and proudly say that this black girl now owns that hospital and transformed it. And adaptively repurposing that hospital into mixed income housing. But not just that, it's an opportunity for us to look ahead and to look forward and make sure that we create opportunities. So something Calvin said today moved me so much. He said, we're not new to this, but I posed the question to this, are we really true to this? Because we've been having conversations for a long time now. And as Angela said, she's tired of talking about it. I'm tired of it too. It's time for us to fight. Let's not just be new to this, let's be true to this. When's the last time you've marched? When's the last time that you've really fought for anything? We're here in this monumental place where Dr. King gave his life and died fighting for what he believed in. Are you prepared to die for our equity?
I'm not sure if they want us to use the mics or the mics on here.
Can you all hear her?
Yes?
Go for it.
Well, oh my goodness, I am just so in awe of these incredible women, black women that I'm sitting alongside, and just so honored to be here in this space. My name is Wawa Guerrero. I am a Gen Z climate activist, and I'm the proud founder and executive director of the national nonprofit Black Girl Environmentalist. So I work in the climate space, so a bit different than the folks up here, and I have so much to learn as well. But I grew up as a youth climate activist. So up until I was 15 years old, I too thought I was going to be a doctor. I'm the child of Kenyan immigrants, so there were three life choices I could choose: engineer, doctor, lawyer. And so I ended up taking a weed out class before I got to college. I took AP chemistry and got a D for the first time. You can imagine my parents' shock. And so in that moment, I realized that I probably wouldn't be able to be a doctor. And I was really questioning what I wanted to do and how I wanted to live my life. This is also around the time of Trayvon Martin. I was really coming into myself and my voice as a change maker, as someone that wanted to do social impact work. And I ended up stumbling into an environmental science class that really changed my life. I had an incredible teacher, educator, her name was Mrs. Rose, and in the first time, in the over 10 years that she had taught this course, she included a chapter on environmental justice. So with that chapter, I began to essentially learn about this long history of folks of color stewarding our earth. I began to learn about the environmental justice movement. I began to realize that the climate crisis wasn't just this faraway issue impacting the Arctic and faraway places, but was actually disproportionately impacting communities of color, low-income communities, and particularly Black communities, not only in the United States, but across the diaspora. And so I became very, very frustrated. I was like, how am I 15 years old and I have never understood climate change as actually being something that could disrupt not only my future, but that of my family that has immigrated to this country and also still in the Horn of Africa. At the same time, I began to realize that there was a huge narrative crisis, right? Whenever I would think of an environmentalist, who that person would be, what that type of vocation would look like, I never thought of myself, my community, or anyone that looked like me. So I went home one day and I told my parents, I'm gonna dedicate my life to environmental justice abruptly. And I followed through with that now 10 years. I ended up getting 2 degrees in environmental governance. I was a Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford, and once I graduated, I decided to say no to my first big girl job offer and attempt to vitalize this digital community that I had created for 2 years into a nonprofit. So we are now a fully operational nonprofit with full-time staff, and our work is really to address the pathway and retention issue that exists in the climate sector, particularly for Black women and Black gender expansive folks. So in the US, people of color make up nearly 40% of the US population, but we don't exceed a 12 to 16% green ceiling. And Black women in particular have amongst the lowest retention rate of any demographic. Now, my dissertation at Oxford was on Black women environmentalists and understanding really what the heart of this retention issue is. And what I heard time and time again was that the early career timeline, 0 to 10 years of experience, is very critical for people to A, get their foot in the door, but B, really access ecosystems of care to want to stay and fight on. So that's where the mission of BGE came from, really focusing on that pathway and retention issue with a focus on early career BGEs. And so we work to create new pathways, really emphasize existing ones, as well as create different ecosystems of community for our members to get to know other Black women and Black gender expansive folks coming into space. We operate under green workforce development, narrative change, and community empowerment. And I'm excited to share more here today. So thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, Aisha Hudson here. I am the founder and CEO of APEACE LLC. We are a DC-based property management company and development firm. We provide housing in some of our underserved communities. Can you guys hear me okay? No? We provide housing in some of our city's underserved communities here in DC, most notably Deanwood. I have been a property manager and housing provider since '99. I think my real story started because my grandfather was in real estate. I am fortunate enough now to be in the process of developing some land that he left to our family in Kenilworth Gardens. And we are focused on providing food access, education, and sustainable living experiences for our residents. We have built a small portfolio over these past couple decades, while I was also a servant leader in the fire service. I retired from the Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department in May of 2021. 9 of those years with the department, I served as the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. So I was able to see some of the cultural issues that we had in the fire service. So I then started moving toward more of a mediation and alternative dispute resolution approach. And this is all while I am managing my housing. So I'm sort of seeing inside of homes in 2 different ways, and it really gave me a broader perspective. So now here I am as a developer, still a servant leader. I am working to develop programming at our new development in Anacostia, and we just want to create more. We want to nurture our mindsets. That's one of our main mottos right now for the company. So glad to be here to listen and learn with this esteemed panel.
Thank you so much. So let's get into it again. Let's think a little bit about the theme of this panel, which is really thinking about strategies to overcome barriers. So maybe, Kathy, we could start with you. What's one tip, tool, or piece of advice that you would give folks in the room when they're thinking about moving in this moment and maneuvering around the challenges that we're seeing when trying to further equity in our communities?
Well, I think education is key, education and empowerment. And what we find in our community is that there's a lack of education among the community. We don't have consensus among our community so that they can appreciate where it is we'd like to help them go. And so all too often you have things that are and opportunities that are being recommended and forced upon families, and how we brand them is critically important. And so people will accept and be receptive to opportunities if we can answer the question, what's in it for them? How is life going to be different? How is it going to improve? And make sure that we have an opportunity and recipes that are unique to that individual. All too often we've used one tool in the arena of community development to solve a myriad of problems. That one tool has been affordable housing. It's only one way that we build wealth in communities. And there's so many other opportunities that we have to look at and consider, particularly in areas like Fifth Ward, when you think about the educational attainment rate being about 75%, which is less than it is across the city of Houston, as well as the state of Texas. When you think about people who are over the age of 16, only 35 to 40% of them are in the workforce. How do we bring workforce opportunities, workforce development, training, and higher wage paying jobs to those residents in our community? When you think about the limitation, the barriers relative to mobility, that only 20% of the people in Houston, and we don't use public transportation in Houston, in case you don't know. So it's important that we have transportation, but only 20% of the residents have cars. So we think about how we look at and how we approach empowering individuals. And we have to understand that individual's unique perspective and what their barriers are, as opposed to creating these cookie cutter templates or one size fit all models to say this is going to solve all of our problems. In Fifth Ward, we have to look at the ways in which we can bring meaningful change to our families. And we talked about it earlier. How do we begin to dual brand our community so that the things that we want for our community are not seen as a negative, but they're actually seen as an opportunity? So let's flip the script and let's take it from a place of not having to an asset-based approach. Build on what we have and make that better and create more opportunities for residents and people based on their individual needs. And that's a concept for us that is truly working in Houston's Fifth Ward, meeting people where they are, not trying to force upon them solutions that the technology and the theories have suggested in the room. And the one thing that's fortunate for us and a strategy that really works for me is that I happen to be them. It's not us and them. When you view yourself as one of them and you can experience and you have firsthand experiences about the challenges that they experience, you're more inclined to be more empathetic, more sympathetic, and understanding to where the real challenges are, and really work to find solutions that are amenable to those individual families. And that's helped us tremendously. So we have different focus areas where we allow our families to participate in programs to help them build wealth in a way that's meaningful for them. If it means that they want to have real estate, own a business, buy a house, have an education, buy a boat, buy technology, whatever it is that means that is going to make the difference for that individual, that's how we're going to move them along.
Aisha, what about you? What do you think some of the strategies that you want to share with this group are?
Sure. Right now, we are developing a program similar to what Kathy shared, based on education. And so not only do we want to teach some of the more tangible things that we need as far as building your credit, savings and things like that, gearing you toward home ownership, but we also want to talk about emotional intelligence. We also want to talk about conflict management and bring some of those kind of softer skills to the community so we can learn to live together better in a more communal way. And specifically our program that we're building, it has a home ownership component where we're going to use one of our sister sites to develop housing for our cohort that is going through the home ownership training. So it's a 24-month program. While they are in the program, they will participate in creating their housing, and we're looking at limited equity co-ops, we're looking at condominiums, we're looking at townhomes, just whatever strategy we think we can make work. But they will participate in building their community while they learn where they live. So that's our foremost program that we're really proud of and working on. And it'll also have a food access component. We're going to grow food on site, and the participants will be able to assist in that process as well.
Wawa, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm coming at it from the green economy space. And specifically as someone that's in Gen Z that is working to support Black women that identify as being in Gen Z, a huge aspect of this is access. And education is absolutely a part of it, but I think we can't talk about education today and the green economy space and the climate crisis without acknowledging the pushback against DEI in our education system. We're thinking about Florida, we're thinking about Alabama, we're thinking about Arizona, these states that are putting in place or on the road to put in place policies to actually ban DEI-oriented education, and you unpack what that looks like, environmental justice falls under that. So if we're talking about a lot of the spaces that you all are coming from in regards to connecting the dots between how communities that were previously redlined are 10 to 12 degrees hotter than communities that were not previously redlined and are predominantly white. If we are coming to a circumstance where young people are going to these institutions that are meant to equip them with the skills to be leaders in the midst of the climate crisis and every other mounting social ill, and there are educators that are not able to teach that legally, what are we doing for the next generation, right? I don't have all the answers. Black Girl Environmentalist doesn't have all the answers, but on our end, when we think about what are pathways that we can put in place in the midst of all these things, mentorship's a big one, supporting folks and connecting with other folks that are already leading in these institutions or leading in these spaces and providing access so that when they are coming up, maybe they don't have access to the same educational programs that other people did, unfortunately, but there's still other pathways to get employed in those spaces. Another aspect is creating better pathways into different green organizations. Something that we have debuted this upcoming summer is a Hazel M. Johnson Fellowship Program named after the mother of environmental justice from the great city of Chicago to really, reclaim this history around Black women and being environmentalists for so long, even though we haven't been recognized as such. And we've partnered with 14 organizations across the country, across disciplines, because the reality is no future job cannot be a climate job in the midst of the climate crisis. So we have climate tech, we have fashion, we have different aspects of social impact around social responsibility, we have conservation, and we have these different organizations, whether it's Harvard's Climate Accelerator Program, Bloomberg Philanthropies Beyond Petrochemicals campaign, Hip Hop Caucus. Brittany recently was speaking and is going to be taking on one of our storytelling fellows. And for the summer, those interns are going to get a in-house mentor. They are going to receive a compensation of at least $18 an hour on top of a living wage stipend of $5,000, on top of an end of summer in-person retreat, in addition to a cohort-like experience and weekly professional development workshops. Why is that package so important? Well, we asked our community what type of package would be one that actually supported them. They told us the numbers. They said, this is the minimum that we need to survive in DC, to survive in all these cities with a high cost of living. This is the type of mentorship that we need. This is the timeline, and we took it down. Participatory justice is at the heart of environmental justice, right? And so when it comes to moving into this new world, I think it's really important that we listen to young people. They will tell you exactly what they need. And because we are the young people ourselves, it wasn't an us versus them. It was like, okay, that makes sense because we're also close to these issues. And I think we have to really listen to the next generation that are really in the midst of all these really uncomfortable circumstances around anti-DEI, anti-ESG, which is a whole nother conversation, but intersect, and being really attentive and working together in that way.
Let the record reflect that Wawa said we are. I'm scooting over now.
It is reflected.
Yeah, she's just deemed us all very young.
That's it.
But no, thank you so much, Wawa. That was really inspiring, and it is really so important to call out these attacks on DEI and just how much of a threat that is to our work, because we really can't pursue justice without looking at what we're trying to remedy, what we're trying to redress, and it's just not going to work if we're race neutral, if we're colorblind, right? So it's important that we talk about it that way. How about you, Tokara?
I've been reflecting on the conversation so far, and what's coming back for me, speaking to a room of advocates who get it. You all have made the intention of being here today, so you are a target audience. You're willing to do the work. We got to get people who are not under the tent, and the way we do that is via community. and community has been effectively stripped from us via the land use, right? So that's a little bit of context, and just to talk about it, we used to have third spaces, which are free places where people will interact freely in all sense of the words without any expectations, and the people of all income stratas, all social backgrounds, et cetera, and those interactions make things happen. There's a statistic I read in a book called Platonic, The Science of Making and Keeping Friends. Fantastic book if you haven't read it, but it's just stuck with me. For every one friend in your personal friend group who is different from you, that reflects across 4 different other friend groups. And those types of connections bring us trust. And when we know people, or at least know that one person in our friend groups, it makes us more willing to listen to those types of groups. And so bringing it back to how community and the third spaces have been stripped from us, we don't have those random interactions. So people tend to silo in our societies, and then that's where the fear mongering comes. Then that's where, when we talk about DEI and anti-woke and Antifa being struck down our throats, that's where it makes it harder for us to do this work. So I would say the one thing that everybody in this room can do to start breaking down the systemic barriers, because we can't say those words professionally, right? But when you have that one person in that one friend group and you can have that conversation personally, it ripples effect. So the one thing I would say that all of us can do to practically start dismantling these systems is meet at least one person that does not look like you, or does not have a background like you, or has not have that shared lived experience. And just that one simple fact can have that huge ripple effect. And paired with the hard work, the practitioner work, that's how we're going to dismantle these systems.
Thank you.
All right, so those of you who know me know that I'm an eternal optimist. And so for our last kind of question here, let's wrap on a hopeful note. So I'd love to hear from each of you what kind of gives you hope and what inspires you and excites you about, what's coming for our work in what lies ahead. And maybe we could just start at the end of the table and go down.
Sure. I am hopeful and excited because we're having these conversations. They seem to be ongoing. There's more programming that is available. So I'm excited that we are being steadfast and continuing to stay with it, even when it's scary, even when it's hard. So that's what brings me the most hope. So let's keep going.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm very inspired today because I have never taken seriously the possibility of being able to own a home for a multitude of different reasons. I'm Black, and I don't come from generational wealth, as well as the climate crisis, right? There's so many different things that when I think about a future that aren't certain because of all those things mixed together and the type of positionality that I have. But to really hear from so many experts and folks that have been able to maneuver these systems, there's a lot of optimism that comes from being able to see an accurate representation of the world, which is that there are people that are doing the thing, that are fighting, that are making the choice every single day to practice hope as a discipline. And so I would say being able to have access to that truth, unfortunately, we do live in a very clickbaity world, right? We don't often get to see solutions-based journalism, for example, or we get to read about an issue and somewhere in the story or at the conclusion, you get to hear about what are the policies that people are pushing through, who are the people that are in your actual community that are doing their best to address these issues. And I feel like community is a huge part of that, being able to expand your network and learn about the different things that people are doing, because I think that also expands the way that we think about our work. Oftentimes in our spaces, we are in silos. I'm very much in climate spaces often, and I need to be in more spaces like this because it makes me start thinking about things in different ways. And I think there's lots that I can learn from folks that are in different spaces and vice versa. So continued shared learning across the aisle.
I think I'm most excited about the Wawas of the world. That's right. And I say that with all sincerity. Despite the circumstances, and here in this monumental facility, I still have a dream. I still dream that one day we can all live together in harmony and there will be peace. And I'm very optimistic about our future because at some point we're going to be mad enough to do something about it. We're not there yet, and I will say for the most part, all the people who in this room have really not had a struggle or a fight yet. And I see one is coming, and that fight is going to change us. It's going to bring us together, and it's going to create opportunity where we appreciate our differences, but recognize that we have more in common than we have that are different. I've been doing this work for 30 years, and we've been talking about this for a long time. When you think about the impact on community, and people are able to see change, and we don't have to talk about change because it's more apparent and it's more evident, things will begin to happen for our communities and happen with our communities that are going to bring about the positive change. When we think about equitable opportunities, if we stop talking about it and be more of an advocate and a lobbyist and have marches to talk about these are the changes that we want to see happen to our community, that's when real change is going to happen. When we lose our sense of complacency and stop sitting it down and really being comfortable about where we are, or saying that the challenges that we're trying to fix are somebody else's problems, that's when we're going to see change. And I think we're almost there. The people in this room and the fact that you're here on a Wednesday in the rain, in the cold in DC means that you care. And you're frustrated enough that you want to understand what the nuances are and how we really bring about change, positive change for our community, and positive growth means that we're almost there. So I'm optimistic that we have talked about it enough in the last 30 to 40 years. And I say that because I recognize that Texas is a little bit behind the times. But when we think about where we are and where we've come from, the last couple of years have set us back 30 and 40 years. And there's a level of frustration and anger that exists today that did not exist before. How do we regain our sense of consciousness and appreciate others for the assets and the things that we bring to the table? So when we have young people like Wawa talk about tomorrow and talk about her desire to be engaged and want to impact change and thinking about the next generation, for me, she is the next generation. So we have to pause and ask ourselves the question, have we done enough to support you in this work? Have we really opened the doors for you, or have we closed the doors for you? And what does it look like? Young people are not looking for a handout, they're looking for a hand up. And that's what we have to turn and look back and say, have we given people these opportunities to bring forth the change that we all desire? So I'm optimistic that it can happen because this is not just a room full of Black and brown people. It's not just a room full of women, but it takes all of us and it takes a village. And so you are our village and you bring me hope.
Chakara.
I'm going to kind of take a little bit of your response, Kathy, but from a different standpoint, because that's what I do. And I'm going to start with a quote for what brings me hope, right? Audre Lorde's quote, and I probably am butchering it, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And so I've always took that as if you're trying to affect change from the inside, you're always going to run up into barriers and bureaucracies and processes and people who've always said, we've always done it this way, right? So with that in mind, I say Gen Z and the generation coming up behind Gen Z, they are pissed off. To use informal language, and they are not going to take it anymore. The genie's out of the bottle. They are informed, even though the system is effectively trying to take away every form of digital community they've built. We don't have to get into all the externalities with that, but they are already aware. You can't close somebody's eyes. You can't take knowledge away from them once they've already gained it. And Gen Z has said that. Like you said, you've given up on the hope. You never even considered yourself as a homeowner, right? Gen Z and the generations after that are not interested in driving. The DMV published a statistic a while ago that the rate of 16-year-olds getting their permits is like declining by 16% and is going down and down and down. There's no interest in it, right? So that brings me hope because they're not going to take what and I put myself in that, what we've bought into and kind of given up on. Like April mentioned that she's tired. I'm tired too. I've been doing this since I was a little girl, and I'm not as tenured as some of you all in this room, but this is really hard work, and we are still people. We bring ourselves to this job, to our work every single day, and if you keep getting beat up by that system, it's going to be hard to change it. But Gen Z has kind of like opted out of that and said, no, I don't want that. That's not for me. And they're going to create a new world, and it's going to be a fight. But we have to get out of their way. Either we have to support them or get out of their way. That brings me hope.
Well, thank you all so much. I absolutely love how future looking and how much brightness is in our future, just hearing from you all on this panel. So I just want to thank everyone in the room for attentively listening to the panel today and our amazing speakers. Let's give them a round of applause.